You have a scar. Somewhere on your body is a raised line of skin that tells a story only you fully know. Maybe you got it falling as a child. Maybe it was an accident. Maybe you don't even remember how. But when someone asks about it, you tell them, because a scar turns private history into something you can show a stranger. 300,000 years before you were born, someone did something almost identical. They took a small ocean shell and worked a hole through it with a sharp stone point. And they threaded it onto a cord of plant fiber and tied it around their own neck. It wasn't for beauty, or not only for beauty. It was a message built to travel faster than words, readable from across a camp, readable even by people who didn't share a single spoken word with the wearer. This is the story of the first jewelry humans ever made, and why, 400 centuries later, we still can't stop doing exactly the same thing. Picture the world before writing, before farming, before any city ever existed. Small bands of humans moved constantly, following animals, following rain, following rivers. In that world, you rarely met a stranger who spoke your dialect. You rarely met anyone outside your own band who knew your name, your family, or your reputation. So how did you tell someone, at a glance, exactly who you were? Not your face. A face is just a face. You needed something more. The answer showed up in the record with startling suddenness. Not tools, not weapons, beads. On the southern coast of Africa lies a limestone cave called Blombos. Inside its layered floor lay dozens of small pierced shells, all the same species, all pierced in the exact same spot. The shells belonged to a tiny marine snail called Nassarius krausianus, barely the size of a fingernail. These shells don't occur naturally that far inland. Someone carried them there on purpose. Someone drilled a precise hole through each one, likely using a small bone or stone point. The wear patterns told a real story, rubbing marks worn smooth against string, skin, and other shells. These weren't beads made and buried. They were beads worn every single day for months at a time. The age of these shell beads, roughly 75,000 years old. But that isn't even the oldest example. Travel north to two caves in what's now called the Levant. In their sediment lay more of the same pierced shells, a related species called Nassarius jabacillus. These shells date back even further, some estimates pushing past 100,000 years. A few researchers argue for dates closer to 135,000 years. An even more remote site, Bizmoune Cave, uncovered pierced shell beads that may be older still, close to 142,000 years old. Maybe more. The pattern is unmistakable. Across an entire continent, humans kept making the same choice. String a shell, wear it on your body, tell the world something about yourself. So let's throw out the word decoration. It makes this sound trivial. Like ancient humans were just bored one afternoon. Archaeologists who study these objects use a different word entirely, signaling. A bead isn't just pretty. A bead is data. It says I belong to this group, I hold this status. It says I passed through this rite. I have earned my place here, I lost someone I loved. Even while you hunt, even as someone who can't understand a single word you say. Here's the harder question. Humans had hands, shells, and sharp stone points for hundreds of thousands of years before this. So why did jewelry appear specifically in this narrow window? One leading theory points to a climate crisis between roughly 195,000 and 130,000 years ago. Earth's climate turned brutally cold and dry, and much of the interior became close to uninhabitable. Genetic evidence suggests the ancestors of nearly every human alive today were squeezed into a shockingly small population, possibly clinging to a single stretch of coastline, rich in shellfish, as almost everywhere else grew hostile. When your world shrinks that small, your neighbors become both your only allies and your only competition. Suddenly, knowing exactly who belonged to your group and who didn't wasn't a luxury, it was survival. A shell necklace could answer that question instantly, without a single word spoken. Shells weren't the only symbol carried on the body. There's a second material showing up in the very same layers, ochre. Ochre is an iron-rich mineral, deep red to burnt orange, one of the very first pigments humans ever used on purpose. At Blombos Cave, that ochre was scored with cross-hatched lines and ground into paste using shells as mixing tools. Ochre gets ground into powder and rubbed onto skin, hair, tools, even the dead. Combined with a shell necklace, ochre turned a human body into a message readable from a distance. And here's where the story gets more complicated and far more interesting. At Cueva de los Aviones, a coastal cave in what's now Spain, archaeologists found pierced seashells and lumps of pigment. The species living in that cave at that time wasn't Homo sapiens, it was Neanderthals. At another site, Krapina, in what's now Croatia, researchers found something even stranger. Eagle talons bearing cut marks and polish, consistent with being strung together as a necklace. Dated to around 130,000 years ago. If that dating holds, Neanderthals may have made body ornaments before confirmed evidence of our own species doing the same in Europe. For decades, scientists assumed only our species was capable of this kind of symbolic thought. That assumption is being quietly dismantled one cave at a time. Not every researcher agrees on how to read this evidence. Some argue the Neanderthal finds are too rare and scattered to prove a truly widespread symbolic culture. Others argue that's exactly what you'd expect from a smaller, more scattered population, leaving a thinner trace behind. What almost nobody disputes anymore is the basic capability itself. Whatever separated humans from other animals, cognitively, it wasn't unique to a single lineage. Farther east, in a cave called Denisova, researchers found a polished stone bracelet from tens of thousands of years ago. It was crafted by a population known as Denisovans, another close relative of ours, now extinct. The instinct to wear a symbol, it seems, may be older than our own species entirely. Learning to drill a shell just right wasn't instinct. It was a taught skill passed from elder to child. That kind of teaching requires exactly the same abstract thinking that spoken symbolic language requires. Back with Homo sapiens, the story of a shell keeps getting stranger. Some pierced shells have turned up hundreds of kilometers from the nearest ocean. Somebody, or more likely a chain of people, carried them inland generation after generation, band after band, trading them onward, farther than any single person ever traveled. That's not personal decoration anymore. That's a supply chain. A network of relationships stretching across a continent, held together by small pierced shells. Long before coins, long before metal, a shell bead could function almost like money, a token of trust between strangers. Within a single band, ornaments likely carried even more specific meaning. Archaeologists studying burial sites have found a clear pattern, some graves loaded with beads, others with almost none. That imbalance suggests status, maybe a skilled hunter, maybe an elder, maybe someone born into a respected line. A necklace of predator teeth told everyone nearby exactly what danger that hunter had already survived. It wasn't just a trophy, it was proof, worn where no one could argue with it. Some researchers argue certain ornaments marked eligibility for marriage, a visible signal of a completed rite. Grief left its own mark too. The dead were sometimes sent into the ground wearing more ornaments than they wore in daily life. A final message from the living, not from the deceased. Nowhere is that clearer than at a site called Sungir, in what's now Russia, dated to roughly 34,000 years ago. Two burials there, believed to be a boy and an older individual, were covered in an almost unbelievable number of ivory beads. Close to 10,000 beads, each one carved from mammoth tusk. Each bead has been estimated to take around 45 minutes to an hour to carve by hand. Do the math on 10,000 beads, and you're looking at thousands of hours of collective labor. All of it poured into clothing two bodies for burial. This wasn't casual. This was one of the largest investments of communal effort archaeologists have found from the entire Ice Age. Whoever these two people were, their community wanted to say something enormous about who they had been. By around 40,000 years ago, across Ice Age Europe, this behavior exploded into full diversity. Ivory pendants and perforated animal teeth, especially fox and wolf canines, appeared everywhere. Carved bone pins and even early engraved bracelets joined the collection. Sites linked to what's often called the Aurignacian culture show ornament styles that differ from region to region, almost like regional dialects, worn on the body instead of spoken with the mouth. One glance at a stranger's ornaments could tell you which valley, which coastline, which family of bands they came from. Researchers who study these ornaments describe this as a genuine information system, a visual vocabulary broadcasting identity across an increasingly large and interconnected human world. 300,000 years, and the same instinct never left us. So back to your scar, back to the story you tell when someone asks about it. Every time you put on a ring, a dog tag, or a pendant, you're doing something a human being was already doing 300,000 years ago, on a coastline that doesn't exist on any map you'd recognize today. You're answering the oldest question your species has ever had to answer without speaking a single word. Who are you and why do you matter? The shell around that ancient neck answered it once. Whatever you're wearing right now is still answering it today.